Barry Goodson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Barry Goodson. I'm a resident here in Pensacola. I'm a paying taxpayer. I've been participating in all the elections from when I first was able to start voting, and I've watched through the years how people put out political signs. Most people are take care of their signs after the election, but I've noted in the last election that we just had, there was plenty of signs put out, and the enforcement of those, of removing those signs, did not take place. But now we're having this special election, and it seems like car number 505 for the city count, for the office for the city, is going around pulling up signs, and he is blatantly targeting the signs that are being put out by the Democrats for our for Jeremy Lau. I live on Scenic Highway, and I've had signs out, and they are removed every chance this guy comes by. And right down the street where I can visually see, there's Mike Hill signs, and they are not being removed. And they are right in the same area that our signs are being placed. And this has been going on and on for 3 weeks now. You know, we run a grassroots campaign, and we do not have thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. We are relying on signage and door knocking. And here we have the city using the ordinance. Of course there is an ordinance, but we've been complying with a lot of the situations and the reading of the ordinance, and yet our signs are still being pulled up every time we put them out. And I just would like to bring that to the attention of the powers to be there. And I've tried to call, but again, when you try to call your city council members, there's not a phone line for that. You have to go through an email page or a page through the computer. A lot of our citizens do not have that, and I find it very discerning that you do not have a phone number or a response in that direction, because there's a lot of citizens here in this county cannot afford computers, do not even know how to use it. You know, we are a large retirement community, and by not having a phone service available for the constituents, it makes it very hard for some of the people to voice their displeasure with what's going on. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goodson.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Yes, I've had quite a number of people call me and complain about the signs that were taken down at the Tryon Library. And I was just wondering if Mr. Reynolds knows who gave the order to take those signs down. They've been up for a long time, and all of a sudden they were down. I just wonder if Mr. Reynolds could shed some light on that for the public.
Thank you, Councilwoman and Mr. President and members of the board or of the council. We've received multiple complaints from Republicans, from Democrats, from those that want the signs left alone, for those that want the signs removed. We strictly comply with the ordinance, and that's what we've done in this case. If the signs are placed in the right-of-way or do not otherwise comply with the ordinance, they're removed, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, whether they're for something or against something. Just last week I was getting complaints that we were keeping signs up in violation of the ordinance, and I said, no, we have one person that does this in their time. Pardon me. And the reality is that that person is the same individual that's consistently done it over the years, and there's been no change in how we apply the policy.
Well, these signs were up during early voting, and we normally allow people to put signs up at early voting sites. We always have. So I don't understand why the policy has changed, because at the early voting sites, political signs have always been up.
Okay.
And they're not now. They're not up, at least not at the Tryon Library, which is one of the sites.
Next speaker we have is Lynn Yes.
Yeah, President Wu, thank you very much. Just a moment. I, too, have received many, many calls over the last few days about people complaining, and today I went and went to some sites that I actually put signs up legally.
Sir.
Legally, and I know they're legal, and I can't point a finger exactly who took those signs down, but I had signs removed, too. I just think that to get this aggressive with this at this late date, I would have liked to have seen us use those energies to do something else until at least Wednesday when the election will be over. But I know for a fact that some of my signs were placed legally and were removed. Thank you.
And Mr. President, if I can,
Sure.
we've also received reports from people removing signs that were civilians that were not city workers, and we can't control that, but I specifically inquired. Someone had said a similar complaint to Councilman, and I specifically inquired. I go, well, was it a city truck? Was it a city employee? Because the one person that does this for the city has a city vehicle, and the answer was no. It was someone else. So. I can only tell you what happens with the one city, the employee that's charged with making sure that they're not in the right-of-way in violation of the ordinance.
Okay. Our last speaker is Lynn Laird.
I'm addressing the sign issue. I'm actually have been in charge of placing signs ever since Carrie Edwards' campaign, including the mayor. And Mr. Reynolds over here is kind of trying to whitewash this a little bit. During the primary, the Republican primary, in front of David Statford's office, every planner had every candidate that was running for this post, every one of them. Out at the Tryon Library, there was about 100 signs. Not only were they between the sidewalk and the street, which is what he's referring to as the city property, in the corners, et cetera, also in the interior parking. The rule during early voting is that they'll have a sign out there. David Statford does that, and it says 100 foot, you cannot solicit or put a sign. During the early voting for the Republican primary, they complied, and they had hundreds and hundreds of signs in David Statford's office, on Palafox, and on Tryon Library. And when it was all over with, I know they were still there because I drove by and watched them. Okay, so fast forward. Early voting for the special general election. It started on Saturday. And on Sunday, I put some signs in front of David Statford's office area in compliance with the rule. I went out to Tryon, put maybe 20, 25 signs in the entrance and in the back part. Not on the street, not in the medium, but in the back, where people drive around there and see them. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call, and this gentleman, 505 in the white truck, he's all of a sudden out there, picked up, not only did he pick up all of Jerry Lau's sign, he picked up all the signs that said yes. And then they all disappeared. Now, did they pick up some of Mike's? Yes. He had 4. And those 4 are still sitting in the boneyard. On Thursday of last week, during the early voting, I went over the boneyard and picked up 110 signs that this gentleman in the white truck, who says he had orders from Bill Reynolds to go out and pick up those signs, 110, and 50 yes signs. I picked them all up, went back, put them back beyond the sidewalk, not in the street, not in the median, not between the sidewalk and the street, but back into the library and a couple downtown. Boom, Friday afternoon. The zealous gentleman in the white truck, he goes out and picks them all up again. Monday morning, yesterday, I went to the boneyard, picked up 57 vote yes signs that majority of you here voted for, and 110 Jeremy Lau sign. The 4 signs that were picked up a week or so ago that belongs to Mr. Hill is still at the boneyard. Of course, he has over $100,000 in campaign funds from insurance companies out of state, et cetera, et cetera. We are running a grassroots campaign, and those signs cost $4 a piece. So I guess Mr. Reynolds doesn't care that a local citizenry loses, no, nothing worse. I got 4 addresses here, Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Lynn.
Well, let me say this and
let's
I'll
not
walk
get-
out of here.
Mr. Lynn, let's not get personal, please.
Okay, 4, well, I asked this Mr. 505 and the other workers on the street, I said, why are you doing this? He said, because our boss got word from Mr. Reynolds that we have to do it directly. I have 4 private addresses, private properties, and this happened today. Garden Barrancas, private property beyond the sidewalk. 5 signs removed, and a couple of yes signs removed. On Bayfront, my friend who lives on Bayfront, a block from Seville Square, had 2 Jeremy signs. He said the guy walked up in Bayfront and took them. How about the corner of 17th and Cervantes? Twice, private property. He's gone up and removed them. A noted lawyer here in town who owns a whole block across from Apple Market, I had 5 Jeremy Lau signs there. The guy removed all of those. So is the city authorizing city employees to trespass and steal candidates' signs? I think this should be a warning to each and every one of you. You're all going to run for re-election in 1 year or 3 years. Are you going to have to go get approval from this gentleman or his boss if you can put your campaign signs out in the early voting? I think Big Brother is getting a little wild here, and I think we will be pursuing possible filing criminal trespassing charges against Mr. 505, and we'll see where that goes. I'm sorry, gentlemen, to be this way, but I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never experienced this action, this blatant illegal action by this current administration. And I was in charge of Ashton signs. I put 110 of Ashton signs out. I was in charge of his 4x4 signs. They all removed. Well, boy, all of a sudden, we got a Democrat that might run. And somehow or another, we got to take his signs down. Have a good day. Did anybody got a question? Because I got the facts.
Mr. President.
And plus, we have photos. This morning, we have photos of the gentleman removing Jeremy signs and leaving Mr. Hill sign up.
If I may, can I have those photos, Mr. Laird?
We
Because
will get them to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
We're having a blown up, and we will give them to our attorney, who in turn will probably, and I'll go over and talk to my good friend, the chief of police, to find out how I can file charges against this gentleman for trespassing.
Thank you, and if I may, Mr. President, signs are always an issue when it comes to elections. You're trying to achieve a balance between allowing candidates their rights to advertise their particular candidacy, and you're trying to balance that with the ordinance that's currently on the books. For example, the ordinance says that for every sign that's improperly placed, you should be fined $2 per sign. We don't do that, frankly. And I would recommend that council take a hard look at the ordinance. It probably hasn't been looked at in a while, and see if there isn't a better way of doing this. I don't know that, and I would certainly. What it does, though, is put staff in a very difficult position, and when we try to have to enforce it. So, any clarity that this body can give to that ordinance would be welcome. Thank you, sir.
Pardon me, Mr. Reynolds, but I believe you informed Jeremy Lau that if you put any more signs out, you were going to fine him.
No, sir, that is not what I said. I specifically told him that we don't fine anyone, that currently the ordinance does say that it's a $2 fine, and we do not do that. I did tell him that.
Yeah, Madam Vice President, Councilwoman.
I have to.
Well, I know for a fact that during early voting, political signs are allowed at voter precincts where you have early voting going on. That's always been. But I think at the very least, we only have 2 candidates who are running. Their phone numbers are easy to get from the supervisor of elections. Those individuals should have been called, and they should have been told, we're going to, if you don't remove your signs by a certain time, they will be removed, and this is where we're going to put them. The people who I think there's a PAC that have put up some yes signs, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that their phone number is on file with the supervisor of elections. But how many people would you have had to have called to at least notify these candidates that their signs were going to be taken up and taken to who knows where? I just think some common courtesy, at the very least, was required. And I'm going to propose that we do look at the sign ordinance in the context of political campaigns. But for right now, today, I think just some plain, simple courtesy should have been used, and people should have been notified in advance rather than just going around jerking up people's signs.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Vice President.
Yes, I would like that common courtesy thing, but whenever we as candidates apply for candidacy, we are given the sign ordinance. We are told, make sure that we look at that sign ordinance. So if any city employee is violating the sign ordinance, or if the ordinance is not clear, then we need to look at the ordinance to make sure that we are clear with the ordinance. Now, I've had my signs. I've put out signs for longer than 20 years, and as a candidate, I've had to go down to the boneyard and get my signs. So, and city employees took my signs, and they were gone. But then I went back to the ordinance to make sure, and the rules, to make sure that I was following it, and if I was not following it, I went and made sure I put it in the correct place, and if I was, I called them and said, stop taking my signs, But I do think that when you have a lot of candidates running for office, this common courtesy thing could mean there is more work. But we are all given a list, an ordinance for the county and for the city in reference to where you can place your signs or where they're going to go. And, of course, they need to publicize where the boneyard is going to be, because it took me forever to find my signs. However, in political times, we always have this issue of someone pulling up signs. If there's someone out there pulling up signs, please stop. They are expensive. My signs, when I did them, was $5.24, grassroots campaign. However, for all of the other conflicts and everything that's going on, that is the political way of things. And there's the competition because you don't know who's pulling up the signs. But if you have any information out there that someone is out there illegally pulling up signs or not following the ordinance, please make sure that you contact Mr. Reynolds, or even you can email them to one of us. We want to make sure that our citizens or our employees are following the rules. And if we as a city council have not clearly defined what those are, then it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we clear that up. Thank you.
And Mr. President, on the issue of notice, in the last week of May, an email went out to all candidates as well with an enclosure of the ordinance, and then another email went out that I just forwarded to council on June 5th that once again warned candidates that we were getting complaints that there were signs in the right-of-way and on adjacent property owners. And I can get the original email to you as well. But again, we're trying to do. I was at a lunch the other day, and someone came up to me complaining about the signs being in the right-of-way. We have complaints from Republicans, from Democrats, and from those that want signs and don't want signs. Essentially, the ordinance is what we use to direct the actions of the employees. Again, to the issue of notice, I just forwarded that email to you.
I was going to let the issue slide because we have a lot in front of us. I know people get awfully passionate about signs. I've had, I don't know if you call it a fortune, a misfortune to be in 5 elections. And I remember vividly one election getting a call saying there's a truck pulling up every one of your signs on Langley Avenue. But I think to the city credit, we know where to go to get them. They're down at the boneyard. Go down to the boneyard and pick them up and go back and put them back up. In my case, I never said anything, but it was interesting. They had been in the locations they were plucked from 3 prior elections, and on the 4th one, all of a sudden they disappeared. But I never said anything. I mean, the person doing it is trying to do the best they can, and it's a very difficult job, and we get awfully passionate about it. But I give the city credit the fact that they do go to the boneyard. As the vice president says, you go down there and you pick them up and you go back out. Very easily, if they wanted to be devious or mean, they could have taken them to the dump. And then you're really talking about a huge expense. So it is a issue that people get very passionate about because, well, I'll just leave it at that.